judgment than, let's say, some precise or more or less simulations, mathematical computations, optimizations, or something like that. Of course, natural are problems with prevailing qualitative attributes. Whenever expert knowledge is involved, with uncertainty, and the last year, I must say, let's say 5 years, it turns out that we are mainly using DEX for recurrent decision problems. So decision problems are not just once, you have to decide on something, you choose the best alternative, and then you forget about everything. No, usually we use DEX for problems which are recurring, like this harbor problem, because ships keep coming to the harbor and you have to repeat the decision. I can also say that DEX, because it requires several steps, or let's say precise definition of tables, is somehow more engaging than a typical multi-criteria decision analysis method. It requires more time, more devotion, so as to say, more answers to questions, but I would say that it is still relatively simple and fast. So usually developing a moderate size takes, let's say, several days. 2, 3, 5 days, maybe I said about 10 Skype meetings, but this is a typical proportion, typical amount of time that is needed. Of course, we have to bear in mind that qualitative models are less precise than quantitative. And the decision rules that we develop, maybe it's too far away, they are shallow. They just tell us, they don't model the process behind. They just tell us the inputs and the outputs, the connection between inputs and outputs, and there is no further modeling, optimization, or whatever, which is very often addressed in OR, is not there. Recent advances, probably the most important advance was recent work by my PhD student, Nate Sterdin. We worked together, who developed a number of methodological extensions to DEX, and this was our long-time wish to be able to combine numerical attributes, numerical criteria with qualitative criteria in DEX. I can say that, so the publication is still, this work is still not published, but it will be eventually. What I can say is that this problem actually turns out to be much more difficult than it looks like. It requires the introduction of 5 or 6 different new different types of utility functions in the model. So it makes the model and the method quite more, let's say, better for practice, because it allows using numeric attributes, but much more complicated for the user. And this is a kind of trade-off, not really always what is always desired. Then we finally introduced fully in the method using probabilistic and fuzzy distributions of values, so we can now evaluate alternatives with probabilistically. And another important aspect is that the so-called relational models can be built. Relational models refer to alternatives, to the evaluation of alternatives, which are composed of sub-alternatives, like here company and department. So now you can evaluate the company as a whole, but also you can combine with evaluation of individual departments. Currently, this has not been implemented in a, let's say, accessible, publicly accessible, user-friendly system, but there's a Java library right now which can be used for this purpose. Another very small recent advance, but also very practical, is I implemented in January this year what I call DEX Xhtml Evaluator, which is a very simple tool which allows you to use DEX models like this one on a web page, and it's practically zero programming. So you develop a model in DEX, export it from DEX, and then with just one small change in a template, you can have a web page working and being able to evaluate alternatives with DEX. And this is finally future plans. A lot of plans. First of all, about, as you see, we are very much thinking about how to implement it, how to provide user-friendly tools. And I can say that DEX is probably at the end of its growth. So it will be maintained, but no further extensions. I'm talking DEX software. My big wish is to use this DEX library, DEXX library, to incorporate it to something which I currently call DEX2. It's a new version of the software which, with all the features that are currently available in the methodology, and that will be user-friendly at the same time. We have already started, but the progress is fairly slow, I have to admit. And of course, there is a big wish to implement this on new architectures. So we have to have all the whole spectrum of solutions, from software library to desktop, model developing systems, of course, to web accessible tools, and mobile tools, particularly for the evaluation of alternatives. And in the research and development part, we have a lot of plans to do. One is the so-called some major plans are to try, in the vein of ANP, those of you who know the method ANP, analytical network process, you know that you have attributes there which influence each other, so there are kind of cycles in the model. And it turns out that these cycles in the model would also be useful for some applications of DEX. And this is one of the research goals for the future. I still think that we haven't done everything what is possible for learning or developing DEX models from data. And this is becoming more and more important. And both me and my colleague Lars Zupan, who once developed the method called HINT, which was capable of learning DEX models from data, but it was very complicated. We both agreed independently that this is a very important further step. I'm also very much interested in what I call behavioral aspects of using, of developing DEX models, of how the users perceive the method. What tricks do they use? What steps do they use? How can we help them? And behavior OR, behavioral operational research, is a field which asks this question, and I think this is very important for the future. And of course, there is also probably one missing link, yes, which I'm quite often asked to do, but I never managed to write a good paper about it, is to compare or to integrate or just to compare different approaches, different methods, especially those listed here. And there are a number of specific issues like visualization, there are some ideas of how to improve the ranking of alternatives, and many others. So, as a summary, I hope I gave you an overview of the DEX method, which, as I told you, it's somehow specific. It came from a different field than OR. It is nowadays, I consider this a kind of a borderline OR method still. It falls in